Today is Monday, April 15th, and we have a board meeting of the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District, and it is 5 o'clock, and we are beginning.
Thank you. Madam Chair, first item would be taking public comments on closed session agenda. There is no member of the public here. Has anybody called in?
Check. No members of the public.
Thank you. We have 4 items on the closed session agenda, 3 items dealing with the various lawsuits filed by the Monterey Peninsula Taxpayers Association. You're going to be joined by our special counsel, Michael Colantuno, who's also on the line. And we have one other item that I would ask to trail that until we've had our opportunity to confer with Mr. Colantuno, and that's our conference with labor negotiators, Mr. Stolt, concerning your general employee unit and management unit and your confidential unit.
Thank you.
Okay, I will, if we're going into closed session, I will lock the meeting.
The recording has stopped.
to the public session. It is a little after 6. So we have a call to order. We've done that already. Yes, that's true. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Are there any additions or corrections to the agenda?
No, there are not.
Thank you. So at this point, anyone wishing to address the board on the consent calendar, the information items or closed session items, matters that are not listed on the agenda may do so now. Is there anybody who wishes to speak?
Chair Anderson, I see no raised hands.
Thank you. So now we'll take up the consent calendar. Are there any items that somebody on the board would like to pull?
I would like to pull item 2,
Item 2,
just for brief comment,
okay,
possible discussion.
I'd like to pull item 5 for comment as well.
and,
Item 3, too.
okay. So the board is asked to pull item 2, item 3, and item 5. We can vote on the other items at this time. So as far as item 1,
I move approval.
You can take all 3 of them if you have a motion to do so.
I move approval of item 1, 4, and 6.
1, 4, and 6. May I have a second?
I second it.
Thank you. Any discussion? Okay. All those in favor of approving 1, 4, and 6, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Motion carries on. a
Motion
vote of
carries.
6
On 1, 4, and 6.
6 in favor and 1 absent.
Right. 1 absent, I remember. Thank you. So item 2 is first.
Yes, I pulled it because first of all, I wanted to commend Nishil on, it seems, I read it carefully, seems really, really well done. And in fact, it made me think, how have we done without this for quite a few years? I know we had a policy, but it seems this is really well done. And I just want to thank you. It seems important to have a good, solid, clear policy that has all the criteria are clear and who's responsible for what. It seems to me really helpful to be good stewards of public resources, and that includes the money as well as water and water supply infrastructure. So I just wanted to say that we're in your debt. There was one thing in the resolution that was not totally clear to me. Let's see if I can find it. It was the bit about electing to, where's that language? Sorry, electing to,
Page 41 is the resolution.
thank you. Yeah, all right, the fourth whereas, it says that the Public Contract Code, Section 2203, requires public agencies to elect by resolution to become subject to this uniform construction cost accounting procedures. Are you just saying, is it a matter of discretion for agencies to elect to be subject to these accounting procedures? Or is it just that if they do, they have to do it by resolution? Sort of an opt-in, if you opt in, you have to do it by resolution, or is it a requirement. I found that line confusing.
Good evening, Chair, members of the board. I will have to defer this to our general counsel. My understanding is that this is a requirement of the public contracting code. And they require us to adopt this language, and then this resolution will be submitted to the agency, and then we can opt into their requirements for bidding procedures. And there's a certain definition for maintenance work and what's defined as a public project. So we can start using their criteria, but this has to be adopted by the board and submitted to them. As to the exact wording, I'll have to defer to.
Yeah, I guess I'm asking for clarification if it's within our discretion to do this, or is it required? I mean, it seems like a good idea, so if it's discretionary, I only see reasons to do it, but it just wasn't clear.
Yes, Director Paul, it is within the board's discretion. The reason why the resolution is attached is because within the policy, we say that we're opening ourselves up to using this alternative bidding procedure, but to do that, we have to have this resolution. So if we decide not to go forward with the resolution, then we'd also have to amend the policy to remove that language as well.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, it seems like a good idea, so. I'm all for it. That's all. I just thank you both.
I did have a concern, now that we have it open. It goes to page 33 and it goes to, there's a section 2.8.1, the urgent purchasing. And it just says that the, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the line down. And the board will be notified as soon as practical for the purchasing exceeding $25,000. I just think practical should be clearly defined, like instead of practical or at the next meeting, regular meeting. I know that the general manager will always inform us of what he did as it relates to urgency, but in the policy, it just should be clear that practical is the next meeting, not when, not when,
Well,
who determines practical?
it could be sooner than the next.
Yeah, I was just
meeting.
gonna say, we could change that
Well, but
language
Yeah, we
to
can
sooner-
amend
the next regularly scheduled or
Well,
other meeting if, special meeting scheduled, but
right, or regular meeting or special meeting, but at a meeting, practical or sooner is, just an email to us individually doesn't allow us to talk among ourselves about
Right.
whether we think it's a good idea or not.
Yeah.
Right.
But the report at a next regular meeting, if he tells us sooner, but the report, when he gives us the rest of the numbers for anything else, but, I just thought that was just
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. We can make that amendment.
So regular or special meeting basically would cover any kind of meeting we would.
Yeah.
have.
Next called meeting, whatever legal says about the next, whatever legal.
Any other comments?
No, just one for me. You can review his presentation on this purchasing from the administrative committee. He reviewed this with the administrative committee and it was on Zoom. So anybody in the public want to hear it, it's on Zoom. So I at our last administrative committee and hey, did a great job. I'm glad he did it because it explains to the public what is going on from 4 pages to 19 pages. Outstanding job. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for
Thank you.
pointing that out. Other comments? Are we good?
Do we want to vote on
You
individually?
can vote on each one as it comes up, or you can defer voting until you've discussed all three and then take a single motion on.
I move approval of item
Yeah, let's do
3.
that. Let's
I'm
do that.
sorry, item 2
Item 2.
as amended.
Second,
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay,
Motion
approved,
carries 6
6-0.
0 1.
6,
six yes,
and 1 absent.
absent.
Okay. Thank you. Okay,
Item 3, Alvin.
item 3,
Yeah, I pulled that one. My question is this, and it basically does with item 3 and 4. Are we producing more groundwater, or are we taking more from Seaside Basin? Are we getting, 3 and 4, we approved 4 already, but those are end of the year reports that should be brought to either a committee or done publicly out so everybody can hear what's going on. So if John can tell us quickly, I see he's on there, so. How are we doing with those?
Right. Yeah, Director Alvin. These reports the report we get every month are for the CalAm main system and satellite system, and so that's most of the water that's produced in our boundary. However, there are a number of private systems. It depends on our rules and how water systems were permitted. They've changed throughout the years, but there have been a number of actual systems that have been approved. And it says in our rules that each year we have to give this report. We have to give the report that's associated with item 3, and the report that's associated with item 4 have to be submitted as draft to the board and to the general manager. And so that's why these come through every year. They come through every year at about this time because the private wells that are reporting, they report once a water year, and we have to get the data in, assess what data we have, follow up on data that doesn't make sense. So we actually go back out and meet with landowners, talk with them about if we think they're reading their meter wrong, we teach them to read their meter. We actually have a number of landowners that ask us to read their meter for them, and so we go through all this and compile this report. So this is the totality of all of the water that was produced by everyone, and it's about the same. You can see it's within 5% variance of last year of all of the producers within our boundaries.
Okay, thanks for answering that. I just feel that these end of the year reports either go to a committee so you can tell us all about it through it, just like we did that purchasing agreement that we just changed. So just in the future, it should run through a committee so we can tape it and you can give your presentation. Thank you. I move approval of this item.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Everybody said aye. Approved, 6, 1 absent. And item 5.
Item 5, I just had a question. I've read these reports in the past. I find them very interesting. But this time I was reading it and came up with a question, so I'm asking a question, but I don't want the answer.
Oh, no.
It's one of those strange things. And I'd like at some future point, it up to the GM on how he wants and the timing and so on. This is my question, then I want to ask you a different question. I mean, a related question. Under what circumstances would the mitigation program be reconsidered, reevaluated? And I'm thinking at the Los Padres Dam study coming down, the implications of having lost San Clemente Dam, having potentially taken that down. And it's a cost, but it's a subject matter that the district has picked up. Some of it is a burden on CalAm, but they've asked the district to take care of it. But so my question is, under what circumstances could or would the mitigation program be reconsidered? So then my question is, I'll leave it up to the GM to figure out what committee, what the timing and so on might be for how we might just address that subject. I would just like to see what the options are going forward, and what changes might be of some interest to the board or to the future. And that's all I want to say. But it's a significant question.
No, and it's ripe, and it's been in our district goals to evaluate. Thomas, who's on, and we don't need to speak about it right now, but he I've been intending to put it squarely on his shoulders to get a firm together to diagram how we can do a monitoring program to determine what the new impacts on the watershed have been of taking down San Clemente Dam, of getting down within the cease and desist orders, 3,376 acre feet. And we need to define that, and then we need to monitor it for a period of time. You know, early on, we had people with National Marine Fisheries Service saying, well, you know, as soon as this CalAM's done, you can stop doing all these fish rescues and other things. What's interesting in the other report on well pumping, now John said it was within 5% of normal, but over the course of longer period of time, the impact of the non-CalAM pumpers on the watershed has actually increased. So we need to pull all of these factors in. It's not something I think that we can do on our own, but we're going to need to get some environmental folks in on a contract and then say, here's the things you monitor, how to monitor. And if the health of the river has shown noticeable improvement, then we can peel away certain aspects of our mitigation program, because you can't just choose to do it, because most of them were put into place as a result of an environmental impact report. And so they were mitigations for primarily for CalAM pumping on the river. So to undo the mitigations will require new findings, new set of findings. So it's been on our to-do list, and we've given it board objective priority, but we haven't made good progress on it. So it's ripe.
Okay, and with that, I move approval of item 5.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Approved, 6, 1 absent. All right. Now we've got general manager's report.
Okay. Let's see if the remote, if I have control. We glossed over this report at the last meeting because of a numbers issue that we identified with very short time to respond. And it turns out that there were some table 13 water rights that were counted twice in 2 different places. Very little impact, but it's been corrected out at this point. So you'll see proper numbers. So, pardon me? Yeah, if you can. Item 7. All right. Yeah, you know, Sarah, it just might be distance or something. You just don't seem to be able to connect from here. All right, this is the Monterey Peninsula Water Resource System. A couple of key things here. Well, only one I want to point out. The actual, now keep in mind the water right on the rivers, you know, about 3,400 acre feet, 3,376. And you can't just hit it exactly. But last year, you know, we deemed that there was an insufficient effort made to use that full water right. Based on the quarterly water budget, looking forward and full knowledge that we'll have met our Pure Water Monterey obligation mid-May, so that we won't be delivering any Pure Water Monterey water in the second half of May or all of June. We are seeing that we expect the Carmel River to get up to that 3,000 acre feet target. You know, last year we left probably 950 acre feet unutilized from that water right, which is really not best practices. So I think we're on target to do much better this year based on what we're saying. Next slide, please. With respect to the other project areas, I just jumped the gun on Pure Water Monterey. So we're just under 2,000 acre feet to date, but we will meet the 3,500 really in a month. So we'll have done our delivery obligation. Doesn't mean CalAM will match it 100%, but by the end of the fiscal year, they certainly will. So we're looking good there.
So it's, excuse me for interrupting, but is that the reason why we're not gonna be getting any pure water Monterey? Because we have met the production, now we're gonna start putting it in reserve.
Correct.
Just-
So we'll pay for our water delivered to our own account to build up the operating reserve ahead of the Pure Water Monterey expansion project, so that we're under less stress in trying to fill the reserve for that expansion in
Yeah,
in 2 years.
when you basically said we wouldn't be getting any more pure for the half a month or month.
Yeah.
I know people out there like me, probably, where's the water going?
Yeah.
Or is the factory broke, plant broke or something?
Yep.
So, okay, thanks for clearing it up.
Yeah, and they want to run it continuously because it to actually shut the plant down causes issues with the membranes and so forth. So it's good that we're in a position to do it, but it does, it augurs for some point in the future when we're not filling the operating reserve and we meet the contractual obligations that, what is going to happen there. So, but we're years away from that. The other thing I wanted to point out is Sand City Desal continues to underperform, hasn't had any output since December of 2023. I do have a story on table 13, but we'll cover that on the next page. So next slide, please. And that's you can see table 13 is the second column, and the monthly numbers show the whole story. March was another good month. And so when it rains, this is a seasonal water right that you can only get during the winter months. And it serves basically users in the Carmel River watershed. And so by virtue of accounting for it as a table 13, you're actually increasing the withdrawals available off the river. So you get the regular annual 3376, but then any additional table 13. And so that allows us preferably to leave more water in the ASR bank for future drought or dry year. So that's good. And then the year-to-date numbers in the bottom right-hand corner show that we're 210 better than last year, which is surprising because we're not as rainy as last year, even though it's a good year so far. But we thought last year had this dip in total water demand because of the raininess. We thought there was less irrigation, but now we're still, we're below last year. So I've always said that we're flattening out, but it's counterintuitive, but we'll wait and see.
What does that mean, flattening out?
So average demand has kind of hit around 9,500 acre feet per year, depending on which data set you use, but that's where it's been. And when it got down to that level 8 years ago, our friends at CalAm said, well, that's an aberration, really demand is up here. And then happened a second year, and it happened a third year. And it's been kind of attenuating at a very level point. But then last year we had about a 300 acre foot, 400 acre foot drop from the prior year.
Right.
And now we're 200 below last year. So it may not be that we've completely leveled off, it's a wait and see kind of thing, but I still attribute most of it from last year and frankly this year to the wet winter, less irrigation.
Well,
And so I don't want to say that consumers have yet again outdone themselves and that's permanently in the base, because we have, as I said, we've flattened out, but now it's 8 years of
and
flattening
I
out.
just
So-
wonder, because just from my layman perspective, the rain seems to be coming at the right intervals this winter, like to really not need irrigation at all. Like last winter, it came so much, but then it didn't for a while.
Yep.
Remember that?
Mhm.
But now it seems like it's.
Yeah, we're seeing it in the reclamation project with the irrigation of the golf courses inside Del Monte Forest, that the reservoir was pretty much full as of 2.5, 3 weeks ago. So it's been really good from that standpoint. 2 years ago, we were in a February where irrigation kicked up. It was just a dry February, and people were out, you know, it was individual irrigation use, you know, not large scale. But yeah, I'm just unwilling at this point to say that we've now put a high efficiency clothes washer in every home and therefore, you know, we're done there. I think we can still make gains, but I also don't think that these last 2 years are permanent until I see a third year of it or a little bit drier year with still this step down. So,
And just one more thing on that point on water saving, if you will. I mean, every time these houses and condos turn over, you get a new mindset of an owner that's come in possibly from out of the area and they're saying, wait, what are these water bills, right? So how do I, you know, I mean,
yeah.
there's a renewal of the mindset because there's a constant renewal. I mean, I know it's not that fast of new owners coming.
But, you know, we've had, you know, we do have a rule on title transfer that you have to retrofit. And, you know, there are some homes that are still 30 years back that have come on the market here in the last few years. And so you're going from, you know, multiple gallons of per flush to 1.38. That has an impact. But the biggest impact has really been high efficiency clothes and dishwashers. Even though, you know, people do complain, oh, my dishwasher runs for 3 hours now, but really low water usage. So next slide, talk about rain. This is, you can see now the March blue bar, it did exceed the long-term average, the red bar. We're actually at 111% of the long-term average through the end of March. But as we turn to the next slide, Sarah, I can tell you that the top of the little red line is now above average. So if rain was to stop today, this would be an above normal year, but based on rainfall. So, you know, it's normal, above normal, wet and very wet. So we're in that leaning towards wet. And then on stream flow, which is the next slide, we're currently below normal through now, but the river keeps flowing even when it stops raining, as you can see. You know, go to those little buttons on the district website with all the water gauges, you know, to play with. And so you can see from the red bars on this chart, you always get something in April, May, and, you know, then it attenuates in the summer months. So if we get just normal in April and May, we will be will be normal for sure, and then heading possibly to above normal as well. So all in, it was a good year, but the last chart is, you know, a little bit of bad news that we discussed at the last meeting with the non-spec water issue and the fouling of the screens. We've dialed back injection at ASR, but we should hit 1,000 acre feet by the end of the week at this point. So, you know, 1,000 is good. Prior to, you know, our very best year, which was 2,345, I think, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then last year, our other two best years were 1,100 acre feet, roughly, you know, 1,117 and so forth. So this will be one of our top years, even missing 2 wells and then having this little hiccup. So, you know, it's making lemonade, I guess, out of lemons. So that concludes the compliance reporting.
So, through the chair. So Dave, how are we doing with that emergency situation with the wells? Are we going to be on time coming into the new budget to get that?
Yeah. So talked to John and Maureen today. Maureen is on. Maureen, can you just relay your view of the schedule again?
You bet I can. We have issued the specifications and actually just put out an addendum today. We were able to get our consultant to review those for us. And we expect to get the bids in, or not the bids, but the quotations in next week. We'll have it to the board meeting next month with them being poised to start on June 1st. takes a little bit to get all of the equipment onto site and in place, get if they have to take part of the fence down, the ability to do that, any sound walls that are required. Then it will take, I believe we gave them 160 days to complete the work. So that's another 4 months. And that gives us a month of unforeseen circumstances before the next injection season.
And John indicated this morning that he thinks we can get another 45 days worth of injection. So even though it's a lower rate, that takes us all the way to the end of the injection season on May 30th. So, so your feeling about the period between rain showers, you're spot on. It was just the right amount to just keep it flowing. So we look good there.
Thank you.
So this next item, item 8, you may have noticed, for those of you who do read the weekly, that Friday was our distribution date for the annual report as an insert to the weekly. When we brought it up to the board, I don't know if it was last board meeting or the one before that, but there was some discussion about also doing it in the pine cone. We did get quotes for doing the printing and the insertion. The insertion itself is about $1,600. The additional printing is another $5,300. So really, it's a $7,000 exercise. I didn't want to pull the trigger on saying yes because I wanted to see what the fallout is from our distribution through the weekly. The comments that I've heard to date are actually favorable. So any of you actually saw it?
Yeah, pick one up.
Yeah.
It's a nice size.
And the editor of the weekly said, I actually read it cover to cover. It was really good. So, it's my recommendation is that we don't do the pine cone this year. But if we want to do this again next year, that we leverage both of them. But I want to wait and still get some feedback on the weekly because it's only been really 4 days. So that's my recommendation. If you want to see it in the pine cone this year, I would need approval for about $8,000 increase.
But this is on the agenda as a report?
Yeah,
for
not
action.
action. Yeah.
So if you'd like to have it for action, you need to direct him to bring it back on a future agenda.
Anybody?
Did you have a recommendation?
My recommendation is wait till next year. And if we want to do this kind of distribution again, do them both.
So-
If I can just weigh in, it does seem like let's take it a little slow the first year and then pick it up maybe next year. I mean, that would be my thinking.
That's fine with me too.
Okay. I agree. Great. And that concludes the GM report.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. You did meet in closed session at 5 p.m. There are 4 items on the agenda in closed session. 3 of them had to do with different variations of lawsuits by the Monterey Peninsula Taxpayers Association against the district. The board did discuss all 3 items, but no action was taken. It was just a status report to the board. The 4th item was a conference with your labor negotiator, Mr. Stolt, concerning the general employees, general staff, your management bargaining unit, and also your confidential unit. And once again, a status report was given. That was before the break at 6 o'clock. The matter was continued, and we will reconvene in closed session after the end of the regular agenda. No action was taken by the board on any of those 4 matters. Thank you.
Do we have any records reports? Trips? Conferences, meetings?
None from me.
None for me.
Okay. So we are at Item 11.
Okay, and this item was requested by Director Edwards based on a presentation that was given to Monterey One Water. It's just an update to our public on how the cease and desist order can be lifted and along with it, the moratorium. And so I think let's start with a little history. Here's a map of the Carmel River to the bottom and the kind of fan-shaped set of tributaries, the creeks and streams that feed the main stem of the Carmel. And the little boundary that you see in kind of dark is the watershed. And then the kidney-shaped blue area up there is the Seaside Groundwater Basin. At the time of the cease and desist order, about 2/3 of all water served on the peninsula came from the Carmel and 1/3 from the Seaside Basin. Next slide.
Thank you, by the way, for including this map.
Yes.
Maps. It's very useful.
Well, and this, this one's a little challenging to see. Some of you have seen a few of these before, but this is the way the river used to get treated. This was channel maintenance. There's a bulldozer you can see in there just kind of clearing vegetation and pushing its way through the channel. Obviously, we think differently these days. Next slide. And this is a scene of the Carmel River around 1980. And you can see it was maintained wide, gravelly, and very limited vegetation. And in fact, that's a seasonally dropped in place pump on a well that you can see the metal cover that has been taken off and the pump's been put into place. And that's the way things were done. And folks, and that's fine. No, go ahead. Similarly, you can see the banks near Carmel Valley Ranch in 1998. And then after some restoration and perennial flow in 2002. So folks around the Carmel River used to kind of see that, the early 80s, 1998, and said, something's going on here that doesn't look very healthy for habitat. Next slide. And this is how erosion control was mastered.
The
Tires, concrete blocks. And then you can see somebody built some jacks similar to, I say what you would see on the beaches at Normandy during D-Day. And that was intended to curtail flow during high flow seasons to further cut out that corner. And the little white arrow, you can see there's a shed, might have been a pump station, I'm not really sure right there. And the same arrow in 2003 after restoration. So this is really the same location at the same angle, and you can see what we think is beautiful. I think some folks on the river used to like the river views that you can no longer see all of the river, but that's a sign of a healthy river coming back. That's right near Schulte Road, which would be I think the songbird sanctuary that Big Sur Land Trust still manages. Next slide. So all of these kind of environmental goings on caught the attention of 4 organizations: the Carmel River Steelhead Association, the Residents Water Committee, which is a little like a precursor to the Carmel Valley Association's water subcommittee, if you will, the Sierra Club, the Ventana chapter of the Sierra Club, and the California Department of Parks and Recs. And those 4 organizations at separate dates in the late 80s and the early 90s. Now, keep in mind, this was also a period of drought. There was a 4-year drought that took place, actually 5 by the statistics. So there was even greater stress on the river that was probably evident at that time. But they all filed with the State Water Board a complaint or a request for investigation, which the State Water Board undertook, and it resulted in Order 9510. In 1995. Next slide. Well, now we live with the cease and desist order. And what happened was in 2008, the Assistant Deputy Director for Water Rights said, hey, after 13 years since Order 9510, it still looks like you are diverting water without a water right. And so a cease and desist order, which is permitted under the Water Code, Section 1831, well, that's the permitting section, but it's really about violating Section 1052. And 1052 is a section that says diversion or use of water other than as authorized in this division is a trespass. So it's all about trespass. And a cease and desist order was circulated. Cal-Am asked for a hearing. It was granted, and the order went into effect in October of 2009. Next slide. And here are the four major actions. Order 9510, which basically calculated, did a legal review and then calculated among pre-1914 water rights, riparian water rights, and appropriative water rights, just how much legal water Cal-Am could take from the river. And that's that 3376 acre feet per year that you often hear me talk about. In 2009, the cease and desist order was implemented. And then in 2016, 2011, the actual moratorium from the PUC was issued. Although we participated with Cal-Am to have a de facto moratorium basically since October of 2009 by not issuing water permits for setting of new meters. And then in 2016, recognizing that we were not going to collectively make that December 31st, 2016 date, successfully extended the cease and desist order to December 31st, 2021. Next. Now, I should point out that since December 31st, 2021, California American has lived within its legal water right, which is a very positive thing. But the cease and desist order still exists. So one could contend that there is no trespass any longer under Section 1052. And therefore, there's no legal basis for the cease and desist order to exist. But the cease and desist order says that in order to lift the CDO, Cal-Am, as the party who is the recipient of the order, has to demonstrate that a permanent supply has been substituted, and that's a key word, for illegal diversions. And the question, of course, is, well, what if Cal-Am doesn't so certify or doesn't do so expeditiously? And one thing we've learned is that any party that claims an interest or an effect can file under the state water code, which we've done before in an attempt to get some water for housing that never got addressed, but eventually got denied. And we've been told by the state water board staff that they will recognize our right again. So, we'd love to do it in conjunction with Cal-Am and the community, but either way, we believe that we need to go forward with the request with about a year to go on the construction schedule for Pure Water Monterey expansion. So then the state water board needs to concur in writing. And the question there is, how long will that take? The state water board's notorious for taking a very long time on things, which is why we want to start with a year in advance on an expansion of a proven project rather than waiting for the switch to come on some new project. As long as we believe that there's sufficient water, and you can argue whether it's for 30 years or 3 years or 5 years, but the idea will be that the expansion certainly provides enough water to no longer be in trespass either for a very long time or while the desal plant is still in the permitting cycle. But they have not signaled that they would undertake hearings, but they said they may want to do a workshop both for the public and their board, which would make some sense. What is the evidence? What is the supply? Based on what? And by the time that happens, we will have very close to 4 calendar years or 4 water years, 3 calendar years of no trespass by Cal-Am. So I think that's an important issue as well. And then if the state water board lifts the CDO, then CalAm can file what's called a tier 1 advice letter, which is a very light form of review and are seldom objected to. So the lifting of the moratorium on meter setting will be the easy part. It's the lifting of the cease and desist order with the state water board. That's the hard part. Next slide. Well, so what is a substitute supply? You know, the key part of all of this is the state board has said, we don't want you to just replace the 3376. We don't want you back in the principal's office. In other words, if releasing the CDO and subsequently the moratorium then frees up more growth, you could grow right through your limits if all you did was replace the diversions on the river. So we want to see a supply that's sufficient under a variety of situations, drought and dry periods, as well as with growth. So we look at, what supplies, this, again, this is district's view. I'm pretty sure Mr. Stratton's not going to stand up and say, well, yeah, we agree. But the district's view is you have supplies not affected by drought, and that's the Carmel River, the Seaside Basin, Pure Water Monterey, Base Project, Malpaso LLC water, and Seaside Basin water that's wheeled from others. So, we've got Don Roscoe's old development firm, DBO, and we've got Cypress Investors LLC, who have sold water rights to Montage. And so that water isn't coming from CalAm supplies, it's coming from these other pockets of supplies. And then we have supplies that are affected by drought. This is really the subject matter of the whole phase 2 supply and demand discussion in front of the Public Utilities Commission that has been going on for a while now. But you have Pure Water Monterey expansion, which the owners and operators of that project, Monterey One Water, says 1,905 worst case in a drought, when the rubber dam is not in existence, and possibly full capacity even in a dry year. The differing opinion in the phase 2 proceedings is CalAm saying it's worth 0 to 1,100 acre feet in a drought. Aquifer storage and recovery, the data shows over a 59-year history of actual stream flows that on average, the project could produce 1,210 acre feet per year. That's the long-term average. But you have to store the water to overcome the 0 years. And so there's a whole point of contention over math and engineering and who's counting storage and who forgot to count storage. And then the Sand City desal plant has kind of proven that even once the intake wells are replaced, that in a dry period, you can get out of balance with your salinity of the intake versus the discharge of the outfall. So that we do believe in the second year of a drought, it's going to take a hit and drop some production. Next slide. And here's water demand in the last 20 years, that attenuation or flattening out that I was talking about. And then you see at the end, last year, we had a little drop, and this year we're 200 acre feet below last year to date. So I got really comfortable saying we flattened out, and I'm thinking maybe we have, but last year and what's going on this year maybe change that assumption a little bit. And hit the next one if you would. It's just going to be a graphic. So that's the point at time during the demand curve that the desalination plant was sized. And they did a backward look for 5 years. So even further back up that slope, that's where the data came from to size the desal plant. That was April of 2012. And then as we move forward in time, that backward look took on a greater period of years, which kept that big slope. And so you can see we're now 3,000 acre feet better off than where we were at the time that the desal plant was sized. And that's where, in our analysis, the world has changed in terms of what can a smaller Pure Water Monterey expansion accomplish versus the need for a desal plant that's 2.5 times the size of the expansion. Next slide. So we developed a series of supply and demand scenarios to both kind of assert what we think the most likely outcome is, but also to recognize that there may be other outcomes. So we ended up with 8 different outcomes, but we used the same 59 years of actual hydrologic data. In our base case, we started in a 5-year drought, which means that's your toughest because you don't have built up storage of any significance, and you're not going to be able to build it up over 5 years. We had ASR injecting as if we get back one or both of the wells that we're currently not using for injection. You may recall that with just wells number 1 and 2 before the little water quality issue, we're doing about 13 acre feet per day. When you have ASR wells 3 and 4 also available with the limitations of coming up over the hill, we can do at least 17 acre feet per day. The pure water Monterey expansion during dry years actually has to borrow up to 145 acre feet from some place in storage, because in their case, in dry years, the rubber dam on the Salinas River isn't inflated. So the way the rubber dam works is you've got a solid barrier, you inflate behind it, barrier goes up, it creates a dam. You got a little fish passage area next to that barrier, but the dam then backs up the Salinas River, and that water then can be mixed with the Castroville seawater intrusion water, project water, to be used for irrigation on the farmer's field. So you're not relying totally on wastewater recycling for the growers at that point. You're also using river water. So when you're in a drought, you can't turn the dam up and you don't have that. And so back flushing of some of that water is lost as a resource. And that's why in the summer months, you're going to end up needing about 345 acre feet from other sources to meet the demands of both Pure Water Monterey and the growers. And then in the winter months, you can get some of it back. So you end up in that year borrowing about 145 from somewhere else. And then in the base expectation case, we started with some storage because we had an ASR balance at the end of 2023. And then we grew demand at the AMBAG growth forecast. We've had those discussions a lot about why do we rely on AMBAG and how good are those numbers and so forth. But with those assumptions, next slide, please. What you see is the yellow line, which is demand, and it's increasing ever so slightly here based on that AMBAG growth forecast. The blue line, which are supplies that are available within a year. And the reason it varies is you're using the 59 years of hydrologic data and starting in a drought and then having some wet years and then dry years and so forth. So some of those facilities that are subject to change in dry years results in that fluctuation. But anytime that you have more supply than demand, you put that in the ground in storage, and then your storage line starts going up, and that's the green line that you see here. And so in this most expected outcome across, this is a 30-year period, you're just building up storage because there's more water than anyone can use in the early years. You haven't grown your demand yet. You don't have as many new houses, new businesses. And you've also got, you've got some wet years where ASR is building up storage, but the Pure Water Monterey expansion water is coming in with no place to go. You use some of it and you store the rest. And so the storage takes off. Next slide. But then we also looked at subsequent outcomes and we said, well, what's our worst case? And we'll ignore the 6 in between here. We still start in the 5-year drought, but we constrained ASR to under 10 acre feet per day because something bad may happen. We don't know what it is, but we just said, drop it from 17 down to 10, skipping that interim 13, So it's a combination of things happening in Seaside or things happening in the Carmel Valley. That you don't borrow 145 in a dry year from the expansion, but it's 345. So you're not able to get some of it back. and that you're now recharging the Seaside Basin beginning in the 6th year. And by the way, that assumption is fairly in sync with what Cal-Am's always told the water master, with it, it'll come online in 2030 as a resource, so that when the desal plant comes online, then the in lieu recharge could come online as well. So we're assuming in lieu recharge at 700 acre feet per year. We eliminated starting with any storage, and we said, and this is the what the heck scenario, what if you triple the residential demand under the AMBAG forecast and double non-residential? And that was for the folks who said, oh, there's so much pent up demand. You can't believe those population numbers. It's going to be double that. It'll be triple that. And so we ran that one. And next slide. You can see that you do run out of water. You run out of storage in about the 27th, 28th year. And so that's our worst case. We're highly confident that we're at best expected, the most expected case that I showed you first, but somewhere in the middle still means that in our world of analysis, without a desalination plant, with the expansion, you've got roughly 30 years worth of supply. You don't want to wait till the 30th year.
So walk me through why tripling AMBAG residential, doubling it commercial keeps us on this chart at 10,000 acre feet steady for demand.
Yeah, so you can see the yellow line, which is the demand line. It does tip up a little bit from that first slide. So it'd be nicer if you got rid of the storage scale, it would be more apparent.
So that's the extent of the tip up with a triple AMBAG?
Yeah. So the combination, if what you were to do was say, we're going to ignore housing, and houses don't use water, people do. So if you use a population forecast and you use the growth rate that's inherent in AMBAG's population forecast, take residential water usage today and then grow it at the rate that's in population forecast for the period, and then take the non-residential water usage today, grow it at the jobs growth rate from the AMBAG forecast. The base case is only 31.44 acre feet per year. So over a 30-year period,
it's very small.
It's less than 1,000 acre feet.
And now I'm going to ask a question going the other way. So one assumption is triple AMBAG looks like the demand is very, very, very slightly altered.
Yeah.
Going the other side, your 10,000 acre feet assumption, I mean, that's high, isn't it?
Well, so in this analysis,
or in either one.
The starting point is higher because I use a 10-year average, and the 10-year average actually picks up some, the front end of the 10-year demand curve was a little over 10,000 acre feet. So this is like, the starting point here is about 9,800 and change. Whereas where we've really been here in the last 7 years is 9,500 and change. And so you add 1,000 on top, you're really talking about a growth rate of 10%, which when you think about it, it's hard to grow more than 10% in 30 years. We're using as much water today as we used in 1959.
Yeah.
With more people. So there are practical limitations to our growth. Now, that doesn't mean we're not going to see projects like the Ascent project that's going to add 105 or 107 apartments, boom, just like that in 2 to 3 years. Or the new hotel in the American Tin Cannery or in Sand City. You will see significant projects that are going to, the Cannery Row Plaza project, that last vacant lot, next to the Chart House in El Torito, it's going to need 27 acre feet of water for everything they want to get permitted. So there will be some of those big jumps, but that's going to be 27 acre feet. How many of those are going to get built in a 5-year period?
Well, and then there's that, and then we we haven't even talked about Stephanie. I think she's on, and
Yeah.
all the things she's gonna do and her successors. I mean, it's so hard to predict all of this.
Well, and
The
none,
one
no,
factor is going to be rate shock, because if growth does not occur, then rates will have to go up to pay for the projects.
yep.
Even if the people don't use the water, it still has to be paid for. And so it will be a very steep increase on rates, and that will have a depressing effect on water use.
And there were just announced some federal regulations on water efficiency standards on new appliances that weren't even discussed in our phase 2 testimony because they didn't exist 2 weeks ago.
Right.
Yeah, so, all roads point to
Less use.
less or steady use, but economically, if you add 40 to 50% to rates, even if you go to what's called a block rate structure, if you went to a single block, you have to take the same revenue requirement that's required today, plus the 40 or 50% if you do a new project, and then spread that among everybody, which means everybody in tier 1, it would have to go up. So if you want to maintain a 2-tier rate system where the first block is kind of your lifeline,
Right.
everybody gets it. Ignore the customer assistance programs. And you're still trying to jam 40% more money into a 2-block system. That bottom block still has to go up somewhat. And the second block, so for folks who end up in tier 2 now, it's going to go up to make up all the difference. So then you say, well, then maybe we'll do a 3-tier system and still try to keep some of the real disincentives in that 3rd tier. Your second and first blocks still have to go up. There's no way to increase your revenue requirement.
Because less and less people hit the tier 3.
Yeah. So you're going to have what Dave was referring to is, the sticker shock. And so any of these new people moving here are going to do everything they can to do the retrofits on a title transfer. We'll have more people taking advantage of $500 for a new washing machine that's higher efficiency. It's very, very difficult to support a claim that per capita use will go up because a new water supply comes on. I mean, right now, water comes out of your shower when you hop in it. It comes out of your hose bib when you turn it on. So,
But they're free to use more water, so people will use more water.
Well,
I mean, but that's not the. But if you want to use it, you'll pay for it, right?
Exactly.
So I'm agreeing where the object is to allow people to use water, and yes, we had to pay for it. Right now, they can't use water, right, for whatever. Yeah, it's still coming out the shower, but we're on this moratorium, so, there's no growth. And so
that's the key is the setting of meters is the big difference. If you now create a new opportunity, because any existing homeowner right now can take a longer shower, can have a garden. So it's really how many new housing units and businesses get built that have a new meter. So it's a new use. And, our contention is that the numbers, even the RENA numbers, once you figure out how many of those are served by Marina Coast and the old Fort Ord, there's not enough there to say that you're not going to be between these two scenarios, that we're going to have a 30-year supply. But what we'll be telling the state or agreeing with one point of view is, okay, fine. Maybe it's not 30 years. Maybe it's not 50 years. But 10 years while waiting for the desal plant to finally get all of its permits in a row is more than enough to stay out of trespass under section 1052 of the water code. Therefore, you've got no legal basis to keep the CDO in place. And then let us get there without the moratorium. And then we get to look at how we're doing. Did the moratorium result in all these new uses? Once it gets lifted. So that would be the perfect situation. Part of it, well, we'll see as we get into the next slides. Part of it's going to, we want to go hand in hand with Cal-Am on it. I know that there's this dissonance over getting a desal plant permitted and whether it's necessary for the lifting of the CDO or whether pure water expansion is sufficient for the lifting of the CDO. So there's some middle ground there where I think it is sufficient, even if you believe you need a desal plant. Next slide. So timing, yeah, go ahead, Sarah. There's a couple of cursor hits. So we expect in July to get a decision on phase 2 on supply and demand from the PC. Best outcome for our view of the world would be for the judge to agree that there's not a compelling need for a desal plant right now and that pure water monorail expansion is enough. Maybe even suggesting the judge could suggest, let's put it all on hold, keep the memorandum account open. Since Cal-Am's telling them they can build it in 2 years once we get the final permits. Say, all right, let's wait 5 years, see how pure water expansion does. And then if need be, you can hit it really fast and build the desal plant. One outcome. But if we don't get the decision in phase 2, it's going to make the story a little bit more challenging at the State Water Board. Next. Around September, it might be more like October. It might be in our interest to let the water year get over and get reported on. We would approach the State Water Board either with or without Cal-Am. Next. And then, and this is what I haven't mentioned to date, if I am a housing advocate or I want to see more economic growth here on the peninsula, the pure water monorail expansion is coming online in a year from September. That is my nearest best path to lift the moratorium. So if I'm a community leader, I want a reason to get in league with the district on this pitch to the State Water Board. And so we're going to be doing outreach. Again, whether Cal-Am's with us or not with us, to say to the chambers, to the Hospitality Association, this is your nearest best chance. Come with us. And then you want to keep cheering for a desal plant, more power to you. Go ahead. But it would be useful for us to have a coalition and not just the district's lone voice, even though we can be the applicant.
David, I did not follow that. So, I mean, I heard and understood everything you said. What is it about the proximity to September of 2025 that causes those
Just
special interests you just described to want to?
just timing to get the State Water Board moving. And so we can do an application to modify the cease and desist order. But then it's very much in the community's interest to go up and meet with State Water Board directors, staff, and make the case. And it's better to do that. Yeah, to get rid of the CDO. And we have, we've got some members of the chamber and others who were like, well, we really need a desal plant. I said, well, you don't have to change your opinion on that. You can believe we really need a desal plant. We've got pure water expansion coming right around the corner. And if it's enough to lift the CDO, if you want to build new stuff and set a meter, you got to lift the CDO. And so let's get the people that want to build new stuff together and try to make that case and be ready to go when pure water expansion comes online, which would be, roughly September of 25. Next. Here's, hope is not a strategy, but I believe I've used the word hope here. Hopefully in conjunction with the new project coming online, they might be ready to go. It's proven technology, it's an expansion. So it's not like they need to see 6 months, but we don't know. We don't know if they can move fast enough. We don't know if they're going to want to see it in action more than a month than us saying, look, it's working. But we would be trying to get them to concur in writing as required in the CDO. Yeah.
I don't want to use the word politics. I'll just say invisible forces I mean, is that a headwind that we're facing? You know, the idea that, you know, the idea here is that this desal plant, in order to get the desal plant, these forces ensure that we don't get what we want from the State Water Board.
But if the supply is there and that exceeds the demand and there is no trespass, the question is, at what point does the state's board's regulation become a regulatory taking? That is the ultimate threat. State board, you haven't acted. You're pretending that there is a crisis and there is none.
So we're out of the area of discretion at this point. Is what you're saying.
How is that a taking? Explain.
That's a regulatory taking. If
Yeah, yeah.
those people who have property but don't have the ability to develop it,
Uh-huh,
and the state board is saying, no, you can't have a meter.
uh-huh.
CalAm is saying, no, you can't have a meter.
So-
And the answer is why? And originally it was because there's a trespass because of the use of water.
So it would be
Or
taking,
because we're not sure there's an assured source of supply. But the more time that goes by that there is a source of supply, it is the state board that is causing the deprivation of property value.
so it's a taking of the property owners, the homeowners, the other property
it-
owners.
It's a deprivation of their property right.
Yeah.
And that's what I was gonna say is, you know, if you're either trespassing or you're not, right? You're stepping on one side of the fence and I go on the other side of the fence, I'm not trespassing. So I don't know how long someone can say, well, I'm not sure you're gonna jump the fence again, even though you're standing right by the fence. I'm not sure you're gonna jump it again, so I'm gonna hold on to this order.
And that's a great analogy because that's really the limbo that we're potentially stuck in, which is, do I believe there is sufficient supply with this little tiny expansion?
Well, but you're saying we can show 30 years, 25 years of not going to the principal. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Those numbers are there that we won't return.
And I'm attempting to say that even if we say maybe a desal plant's needed, but we got 10 years worth here on top of the 3 that you just already had demonstrated to you. So you can send us back if we're not in compliance in that 14th year, but that's more than enough. So it's going to come down to,
The question for the state board is, what about equal protection? What about all of the other districts that might suffer from a drought or might not have enough water? Why aren't they under a cease and desist order?
Because we already got the scarlet letter back in 1996.
yeah.
But you're off the trespass.
Right.
And that's why I'm saying when I look at year 27, you know, before you get to 30, you know, that can happen to anybody. And maybe before 25, 27 year, we implement our own moratorium. You know, we slow down, right? Slow down growth again.
Yep. Yeah. And I think that's what it comes down to is how far in the future can they even look as a state board and say, we're protecting you from yourselves, you know? Last one, I think. That tier 1 advice letter. Because if the cease and desist order is lifted, there's no reason to not lift the moratorium.
And that tier 1 advice letter at that point, that doesn't seem very controversial.
No,
Oh, no.
To any stakeholder. review.
CalAm files it, everyone sees it. There's a process to protest. If there is no protest, it takes effect automatically.
No, I mean, it's not controversial for CalAm to want to file.
Well, it shouldn't be.
Right.
Yeah.
We were gonna get rid of the moratorium.
Yeah.
We'll sell more water.
Then they can,
well,
the politics, right, then they'll be exposed.
Yeah.
Right? So we don't have to go there, but I'm just saying, that's the indication of official files.
yeah.
And my frequently used rejoinder, yeah, expect delays. Last slides.
I just want to go back to,
Every presentation ends.
Should.
That's good, he's in the rain.
I just want to go back to the 5 steps and the timing. The middle one about work for community support.
it seems to me the question to those who want to lift the CDO have a choice. They have a choice of taking a project that is under construction and has a target date and has all its permits and has a schedule for completion, and then a definite connection to lifting the CDO. So a community person would have that choice, or the choice of supporting the desal project from Cal-Am. Does not have the support. I mean, excuse me, does not have a project underway, does not have all the permits, speculative about whether they'll ever get the Coastal Commission approval, because there's been history about it having been difficult. I mean, so the person who's interested in lifting the CDO has a choice of what we see in front of us that's factual and real versus what's been advocated for and not definite because there's so many incomplete steps in that process. Which do they want to choose? And it's a message question about giving them a choice or what. But if they're interested in lifting CDO, then they should be going with the district and its plans as we've seen here tonight.
May I?
Then-
Yeah, good point. And another way of saying the same thing is for all those people who want to be able to want development, it's now possible. It's going to be possible. The expansion will make it possible to start finally developing. As I keep hearing, I know so many people have been convinced that only the desalination plant will permit development. I mean, that idea is taken hold of people's minds in many cases, from that's the impression I get. And hopefully we'll be able to make it clear that the expansion, actually, it is the expansion that makes development possible in the near term, at least for some period of time. It's not to say it may not meet the needs in the, go forever, but for at least a couple of decades, 2 or 3 decades, it enables us to start development. I hope we should be able to make that clear.
And that's a good point. When are we going to be able to sit up there, sit here and sit up there and say, we're going to move ahead? Expect delays, we have lived with that. But at some point, we got to be willing to go ahead. We may not get the business, the hospitality to get behind us, but as a board, we're going to have to be willing to say we're going to push ahead and don't let Cal-Am or the public slow us down, waiting for a desal project.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I like the idea of pushing forward now and being able to say in a year, it's that by the time it's actually online, expansion is when we'll probably get the water board to make a decision. So I like that.
I agree with you. I'm not in a stage of, oh, let's wait and see what hospitality or let's wait and see what Cal-Am do. If we're going to do this, let's push ahead and get that answer from the state. Yes or no. They got a problem answering people. I learned that back when we was asking whoever was in charge up there to answer a letter for us.
Yeah. Well, and that's the way the schedule is basically set up. It's us taking an action when we see that we're a year away from flipping the switch on pure water expansion.
Mhm.
Going sooner than that's premature. Going at about that time, we'll have a strong sense of whether we are on schedule, because at that point you could lose a month or 2, but you're not going to lose a year.
Right.
Madam Chair, would you like to see if there's anyone from the public that would want to comment on this?
I would. I just want to thank Dave Stoll for thinking through the timing so well.
Well, I just want to add one other thing, is that the allocation process fits into the same schedule.
So
About
it-
reaching out, outreach,
Yeah.
looking ahead, planning some definite timing related efforts.
Yeah, in the last discussion we had on the allocation process, I think we made it clear that it's going to be less of a negotiation and more of
We're gonna manage it.
we're going to manage it.
Thank you. We're gonna manage it.
But there's so many,
It's not on the agenda.
there's so many moving parts that we're going to have to just kind of lay down based on what we know. Here it is, and the schedule works with this schedule.
Okay, just a point.
Okay, do we have anyone from the public who would like to? Make a
Yes,
comment?
Chair Anderson, we have Susan Schiavone.
Okay, welcome, Susan.
Hi, hello, everybody. Good evening. I just want to support what you're doing. I agree with Alvin. You want to get the support of the people who are the interested parties in terms of wanting development. And yes, and I think they will probably support you, but yes, push through as a district. You take the leadership on this and go. And I think you are at a point now where you have enough facts, and hopefully if the CPUC makes the right decision, that will be a real support for this, extremely so. And I'm really happy that you're moving in this direction. So I just want to say, yeah, I support this very much. And I do hope that the hospitality interests and business interests will see the value of getting on board for this, because it truly is an opportunity for them to get going earlier than later. And there are no guarantees that that desal plant is going to happen anytime soon. So they should take the bird in the hand. Okay, thank you very much for doing this.
Thank you, Susan.
Chair Anderson, I see no other raised hands.
So I don't see anything else on the agenda.
If there was a request to go back into closed session.
And there's, yes, there was a request. So at this time, we can adjourn the public meeting, and then we will go into closed session. So let